The scrapyard was silent, except for the wind moving over broken metal and old wrecks of forgotten ships. Rows of ruined engines, rusted hulls, and shattered weapons stretched across the dry ground. To anyone else, it was nothing but junk. But for Captain Rourke, it was a gold mine. He stood on the ridge, his boots crunching against loose bolts and fragments, his eyes searching for something more than scrap. He was a man who had seen too many battles and too many defeats, and yet he kept moving, always looking for a chance, for one last play against the odds. That day, the sun was low, painting long shadows across the wrecks. Behind him, his small crew waited. They were not soldiers anymore. Some were engineers, some were smugglers, some had simply followed him because they had nowhere else to go. Their ship was small, their supplies low, and their enemies too many. But Rourke carried an idea in his mind that none of them could see yet. He climbed down into the junk field and touched the side of a massive hull. It was half buried in sand, the metal scorched and blackened from some old war. The markings were alien, a language most of the galaxy had forgotten. His fingers traced the lines, and for a moment he felt something almost alive, as if the machine had not yet given up. His crew gathered around, curious but wary. "What is this, Captain?" one of them asked. Rourke's eyes narrowed. "Not junk," he said softly. "A weapon. Maybe the last weapon we'll ever need." The crew looked at each other. They saw nothing but a ruined machine, a piece of a dead empire that had lost its power long ago. But Rourke was different. He had fought those aliens once, years before. He had seen their ships tear through entire fleets, unstoppable, merciless. And now, here in the dirt of an abandoned world, he saw one piece of their forgotten strength. The others whispered among themselves. "It's useless," one muttered. "Even if it's alien tech, it's broken." Rourke didn't answer. Instead, he ordered them to clear the sand, to dig until the whole shape revealed itself. Hours passed. The crew's hands bled, their backs ached, but slowly, the weapon came into view. A cannon the size of a starfighter, its barrel cracked but still intact, its core hidden deep inside. It looked like a beast sleeping under the ground. When night came, they lit fires around it. The wind carried sparks across the empty yard, and the crew sat close, tired but restless. Some were afraid. They whispered that alien machines carried curses, that touching them was dangerous. Others dreamed of power, of what it would mean to carry such a weapon when the galaxy was against them. Rourke said nothing. He just stared at the dark shape, his mind already working, already building. The next morning, they brought out their tools. Sparks flew as they cut into the outer hull. Strange metal groaned, unlike anything human-made. Wires glowed faintly when touched, as if the machine still remembered its purpose. The crew worked in silence, the sound of their tools echoing across the junk field. Every time they thought the weapon was dead, a light flickered inside, reminding them it was not. Then it happened. One of the crew struck too deep. A sudden pulse of energy burst out, a wave of blue light that lit the entire scrapyard. The ground shook, the fires went out, and for a second, all of them were blinded. When their eyes cleared, the weapon was glowing faintly, its barrel humming with a sound too deep to be natural. Some of the crew shouted in fear, others stepped back, ready to run. But Rourke only smiled. His face was lit by the cold blue glow, and for the first time in many months, he looked alive. "This is it," he whispered. "This will change everything." But even as he spoke, a shadow passed overhead. They looked up, and their hearts sank. Far in the night sky, lights moved, ships, not theirs. Someone had noticed the awakening of the weapon. Someone who would not let it fall into human hands. Rourke clenched his fists. He knew they had little time. The weapon was alive again, but it was not ready. If those ships landed, they would all die before the weapon ever fired. The crew looked at him, fear and hope burning in their eyes. "What now, Captain?" one asked. Rourke stared at the sky. The enemy was coming, faster every moment. He felt the old fire rise inside him, the fire of a soldier who had nothing left to lose. Now, he said, his voice steady. "We finish what we started. No matter what." The scrapyard was no longer quiet. The night was alive with the hum of alien power, the glow of forgotten technology, and the distant thunder of ships drawing near. The weapon that could shatter a fleet was waking, and the galaxy was about to notice. The night stretched long, but nobody slept. The crew worked under the faint blue glow of the alien weapon, their hands trembling every time it hummed. They felt as if the machine was watching them, judging them. Some whispered it wanted to be alive again, others whispered it wanted blood. Captain Rourke didn't care. To him, it was their only chance. Above the junkyard, the enemy ships grew closer. They were not just scouts. Their formation was tight, their engines burned like angry stars. Whoever they were, they had seen the pulse of energy, and they were coming to claim it. The crew argued while they worked. One wanted to run, another said they should bury the weapon again and disappear. But Rourke silenced them with a sharp look. His eyes carried the weight of too many battles. "If we run," he said, "we die tired. If we fight, we might just live." The words sank into their bones. They knew he was right, even if fear whispered otherwise. Hours passed. The weapon groaned as panels were opened, circuits exposed, cores unlocked. Strange symbols glowed, symbols no human could read, yet they pulsed with a rhythm, as if the machine remembered its makers. Sparks of energy licked across the ground when the wrong wire was touched. One crewman nearly lost his arm when a sudden jolt burned through the air. But slowly, painfully, the weapon began to awaken. Then a low alarm echoed through the cruise ship, parked nearby. The enemy was entering the atmosphere. The sky turned red as streaks of fire tore downward, dropships. The crew froze, tools in their hands, eyes wide with panic. "They're here!" someone shouted. Rourke stood tall, his shadow cast long by the glow of the alien cannon. He did not flinch. "Then we finish faster. No mistakes." The ground shook as the first dropship landed on the ridge. Dust and metal fragments swirled through the air. The crew could hear doors opening, boots striking the earth, voices speaking in a harsh alien tongue. They knew the sound well. These were not mercenaries. These were the same enemy Rourke had fought years ago, the ones who had once slaughtered human fleets without mercy. A crewman, young and trembling, grabbed Rourke's sleeve. "Captain, we can't fight them. Not like this." Rourke's eyes burned. "We don't fight them. The weapon does." The enemy moved closer, their lights sweeping across the field. The glow of their helmets cut through the darkness. Strange figures, tall and armored, with weapons that hissed like snakes, advanced step by step. The crew took cover behind the weapon's body, breathing hard, their hearts racing. One of them pulled out a rifle, but Rourke pushed it down. "Not yet," he whispered. Inside the weapon, a sudden hum grew louder, vibrating the ground. Strange lights rippled across its surface, patterns that looked alive, shifting like water. The cannon's barrel lifted slightly, as if testing its own strength after centuries of silence. The air smelled of ozone, sharp and heavy. The aliens froze when they saw it. Even they, the original masters of this technology, stepped back. One barked orders, and more soldiers poured out of the dropships, spreading across the ridge. They were afraid, but they were not foolish. They would destroy the weapon before it could rise again. Rourke saw their hesitation and smiled grimly. He knew fear in soldiers, no matter the species. But he also knew time was short. "Get the power core linked," he barked to his engineers. "Now." Hands moved quickly, connecting wires from their own ship to the alien circuits. Sparks erupted. Systems whined. The crew shouted over the noise, their faces pale, but they obeyed. The aliens opened fire. Bright streaks of energy shot across the junkyard, exploding against metal wrecks. The crew ducked, some screamed, but the weapon remained untouched. Its strange armor absorbed the blasts, glowing faintly where the shots struck. Then, without warning, the cannon roared. A wave of force ripped through the air, knocking everyone to the ground, human and alien alike. The weapon's barrel glowed bright white, and a pulse of energy shot into the sky. It wasn't aimed at the aliens yet. It was only testing, stretching, waking. But the sound shook the earth and split the clouds above. The aliens panicked. Some fell back, shouting orders in their sharp voices. Others fired wildly at the weapon, desperate to break it. Rourke, his ears ringing, pulled himself to his feet and shouted over the chaos. "It's alive! Hold the line! Just a little longer!" The crew scrambled, fixing broken connections, adjusting controls they didn't understand, praying the machine would listen. Another blast tore from the weapon, this time slamming into the ridge above. Rocks and metal flew, sending alien soldiers scattering. Their formation broke. Fear spread among them like fire. The crew's faces lit with hope, but Rourke knew better. This was only the beginning. The weapon was powerful, yes, but not yet under their control. It was like a wild beast thrashing in chains. If they didn't tame it, it would burn them as easily as their enemies. The aliens regrouped, heavier weapons in hand. Their dropships powered up, preparing to unleash fire from above. Rourke gripped the edge of the cannon, feeling the vibration in his bones. His voice was low, steady, like he was speaking to something alive. "You want to fight? Then fight with us, not against us." The cannon hummed in answer. The night was no longer silent. It was war, raw and brutal, and the scrapyard was the battlefield. The weapon had woken, and the galaxy was watching. The ground was burning. Smoke and dust filled the scrapyard as the alien dropships fired down from the sky. Explosions tore apart piles of old wrecks, sending shards of metal flying in every direction. The crew ducked for cover, their ears ringing, their lungs choking on ash. Yet through the chaos, the weapon stood tall, its barrel glowing like the heart of a star. The alien soldiers advanced again, armored figures moving with deadly discipline. Their weapons cut through the dark with sharp bursts of energy. They shouted in their strange tongue, their voices cold and merciless. They were no longer afraid, they were determined to crush this rising threat before it could grow. Rourke rose from the dirt, his jacket torn, his face streaked with grime. But his eyes burned like fire. He shouted over the roar of battle, his voice carrying through the smoke. "Hold the weapon steady. Feed it everything we have." The engineers scrambled to keep the power flowing. They ripped apart their own ship systems, pulling out core after core, plugging them into the alien machine. Sparks rained down, wires hissed, panels cracked, but the weapon drank in the power like a starving beast. Its glow spread across the ground, casting strange shadows that danced over the junkyard walls. Then the weapon fired again. A thunderous blast shook the world, its beam carving across the ridge where the alien forces gathered. Rocks vaporized, armor shattered, and dozens of soldiers were swept away in the blinding light. The air smelled of burning metal and ozone. The scream of alien voices echoed, then vanished into silence. The crew stared in awe, their fear forgotten for a moment. They had just watched a single shot erase what should have taken an army to kill. For the first time, they felt like they could win. But Rourke did not smile. He watched the weapons glow carefully, his mind racing. The cannon was too strong, too wild. Its shots cracked the ground beneath their feet, shaking the junkyard apart. If they could not learn to control it, it would destroy them along with their enemies. Another alarm screamed through the night. The alien dropships above shifted their formation. Panels opened along their sides, revealing massive cannons of their own. They were preparing to strike with everything they had. Rourke cursed under his breath. He turned to his crew. "They'll blast us into dust if we don't hit first. Charge it again." The crew obeyed, sweat pouring down their faces as they worked. One by one, the last power cells were dragged out and forced into the machine. The weapon roared, brighter than before, its hum rising to a deafening pitch. But something was wrong. The cannon's glow began to pulse unevenly, surging and fading, almost like a heartbeat. Strange symbols burned across its surface, moving too fast to follow. The air grew heavy, pressing down on their chests. Some of the crew backed away, fear gripping their faces. "Captain, it's unstable," one engineer warned. "If we fire now, it might tear itself apart." Rourke's jaw clenched. He looked from the terrified faces of his crew to the enemy ships above. Their cannons were seconds from unleashing death. He had no choice. "Better to burn than be buried," he said. "Do it." The weapon screamed. A beam of pure energy ripped upward, slicing through the night sky. It hit the first dropship head-on, cutting it in half like paper. Fire bloomed as the wreckage spiraled down, crashing into the junkyard with a sound like thunder. The shockwave rolled across the field, knocking men and metal alike to the ground. The second ship tried to veer away, but the beam followed, hunting it like a predator. Its engines exploded, sending flames across the clouds. The sky itself seemed to burn. The crew cheered wildly, but their joy lasted only a moment. The cannon's glow suddenly flared too bright, then dimmed to almost nothing. Its surface cracked, vents of smoke hissing out. The weapon sagged, its barrel dropping low as if exhausted. Rourke rushed to its side, touching the hot metal with his bare hand. He could feel it trembling, alive but in pain. It had given everything in those 2 shots, and now it was close to breaking. The last alien dropship hovered above, its massive cannon charging. The crew scrambled in panic. They had no more power cells left, no more tricks. The weapon was too weak to fire again. For the first time, silence fell over them. Death loomed in the red glow above. Then something unexpected happened. The weapon spoke. Not in words they could understand, but in sound, deep, echoing vibrations that resonated inside their bones. The crew froze, staring at the cannon as the strange voice filled the air. It was not human, not alive in the way they knew, but it was clear. The weapon was choosing. The alien ship fired. A massive beam of destruction tore through the sky, racing toward the junkyard. The weapon's glow returned in an instant, brighter than ever before. Without the crew touching it, without their control, it lifted its barrel and unleashed a blast that split the heavens. The 2 beams collided in midair, tearing the night apart in a storm of fire and light. The ground shook. The crew were thrown down. The sky screamed with thunder as energy ripped across the atmosphere. For a moment, it felt like the entire world would break. When the light faded, silence returned. The alien ship was gone, burned into nothing. The crew lay on the ground, their bodies aching, their ears ringing. Slowly, they looked up at the weapon. It stood tall again, glowing faintly, almost calmly, as if it had never been broken. Rourke rose to his feet, his eyes wide. He understood now. This was not just a machine. It was something greater. And it had just chosen them. The silence after the battle was heavier than the smoke. The crew stood around the weapon, their faces pale in the faint blue glow. They had survived, but none of them cheered this time. The weapon had fired on its own. It had saved them, yes, but it had also chosen to act without them. Rourke's eyes stayed fixed on the glowing barrel. He had seen many weapons in his life, but never one that decided when to kill. Slowly, he stepped closer, his hand brushing against the strange symbols carved into its side. They shifted under his touch, moving like liquid light. The cannon seemed to respond, humming softly, almost like a living thing. "Captain," one of the engineers whispered, his voice trembling. It's alive. It has a mind." Rourke didn't answer. His jaw was tight, his thoughts heavy. He had suspected something like this from the moment it first hummed. But now there was no denying it. This was not just a weapon. It was something far more dangerous. The crew whispered among themselves, fear growing stronger than hope. One of them wanted to leave, to abandon the machine before it turned on them. Another argued they should use it, that with such power they could destroy anyone in their way. The scrapyard echoed with their voices, sharp and desperate. Rourke silenced them with a single word. "Enough." He turned to face them, his shadow long against the glow. "We don't run. We don't throw this away. This is our chance. But if any of you doubt me, leave now. Because this thing will change everything, and I intend to see it through." Nobody moved. Fear chained them, but so did the spark of possibility. They had seen what the weapon could do, and even if it frightened them, they could not walk away from it. The weapon hummed louder, as if it had heard his words. Then, without warning, the ground beneath them shook again. But it was not the weapon this time. A deep rumble echoed across the junkyard. Dust fell from broken hulls, old wrecks groaned and collapsed. The crew looked around in alarm. From the horizon, lights appeared. Not just one or two, but dozens, ships, big and small, descending like predators. Their engines lit the night, and their comm signals filled the air with static. Whoever had been watching from afar was now closing in. The weapon's awakening had spread across the system, like a beacon. The crew's faces drained of color. "More of them," one muttered. "Too many. We can't fight all that." Rourke's eyes narrowed. He had expected this. Power never stayed hidden for long. He turned back to the weapon, his voice steady, almost calm. "Then we don't fight them alone." He pressed his hand firmly against the glowing surface. The weapon pulsed, sending a jolt through his body that made his heart race. His vision blurred. For a moment, he wasn't standing in the scrapyard anymore. He was somewhere else. Dark corridors stretched around him, endless halls of alien metal. Voices echoed in a language he didn't know but somehow felt he almost understood. The hum of the weapon was all around him, in his chest, in his bones. And then he saw flashes, fleets burning, planets shattered, alien warriors falling under the same light he had just witnessed. The weapon had memories, scars of old wars. It had destroyed before. It wanted to destroy again. Rourke staggered back, gasping for breath. His crew rushed to steady him, but he waved them off. His eyes burned with something new. Fear, yes, but also resolve. "This thing remembers war," he said hoarsely. "It remembers killing. And now it's waiting for us to tell it where to aim." The crew fell silent. They looked at the sky, where the enemy fleet was drawing closer, and then back at the glowing weapon. Suddenly, the weapon shifted. Its barrel lifted, turning toward the approaching ships. It was ready, eager, as if it could taste their presence. One of the crew shouted, panicked, "Captain, it's moving on its own." Rourke stared at the cannon. The truth hit him like a blow. The weapon was not just alive. It was choosing its enemies without waiting for orders. And yet, its aim was true. The ships above were the threat. The weapon knew it. "Let it fire," Rourke said, his voice hard. The cannon roared. A blast tore across the horizon, striking the first wave of ships before they could even form a line. Fire lit the night sky, debris raining down like falling stars. The crew shielded their eyes from the blinding light. But the weapon didn't stop. It fired again, then again, beams of pure destruction ripping through the sky. The enemy fleet broke apart in panic. Some tried to escape, but the weapon hunted them, its blasts following like a predator locked on its prey. The junkyard shook with every strike. The crew clung to whatever they could, their fear now mixed with awe. They weren't controlling it anymore. They weren't even needed. The weapon had become its own commander. Then, silence. The fleet was gone, reduced to wreckage drifting in flames. The weapon's glow dimmed again, but this time it felt different, like it was watching them, waiting. Rourke stared up at it, his fists clenched. He understood now. This was not their weapon. They were its. The junkyard was quiet again, but the silence was not peace. The crew stood in the glow of the weapon, their eyes fixed on its towering form. Smoke still drifted from the wreckage of the alien fleet, lighting the horizon with faint fire. They had survived again, but this time there was no cheering. The truth had sunk into their bones. The weapon had fought on its own. Rourke's crew whispered among themselves, voices sharp with fear. Some said they were cursed. Others said they were blessed. But all of them knew one thing: they were no longer in control. The captain stood apart from them, staring at the alien machine. His jaw was tight, his thoughts racing. He had wanted a weapon. He had wanted a chance. But this thing was more than a weapon. It had a will. And that will was dangerous. The glow along its barrel pulsed slowly, steady, like the beat of a heart. It was waiting. Rourke could feel it, even without touching it. It wasn't resting. It was listening. One of his men, younger than the rest, broke the silence. "Captain, what if it doesn't stop? What if it decides we're next?" No one laughed. No one argued. The question hung heavy in the air. Rourke turned, his voice hard but calm. "It hasn't killed us yet. That means something. It fired at them, not us." The young man shook his head. "Not yet. But what if it changes its mind?" The others muttered nervously. Doubt spread like fire. Rourke raised his hand, silencing them. "If it wanted us dead, we'd already be ash. But it hasn't. That means it sees something in us. Maybe it sees soldiers. Maybe it sees survivors. Maybe it sees tools. I don't know. But I do know this: if we walk away, someone else will claim it. And then it won't be our problem anymore. It'll be humanity's grave." The crew fell quiet. They knew he was right, even if they hated it. Then, without warning, the weapon shifted again. Its barrel turned, not to the sky, not to the horizon, but toward them. The crew froze, hearts pounding, eyes wide. The blue glow brightened, bathing them in cold light. For a terrible second, they thought this was the end. But instead of firing, the weapon released a pulse, a wave of energy that rippled across the junkyard. It didn't burn. It didn't kill. It passed through them like a cold wind, leaving their skin tingling and their minds spinning. Images filled their heads. Not words, not voices, but visions. They saw fleets burning in the dark. They saw alien empires falling, one by one. They saw the weapon standing at the center of it all, the executioner of worlds. And then, they saw themselves. The crew gasped. They saw themselves inside those visions, standing beside the weapon as more fleets burned. Human fleets. Alien fleets. Every fleet. The pulse faded. The glow dimmed. The visions ended. No one spoke. Fear clamped their throats shut. Finally, one of them whispered, his voice broken. It showed us the future." Rourke didn't answer. His fists were clenched, his chest tight. He knew what they had seen. He knew what it meant. The weapon wasn't just remembering its past. It was promising them something. One of the older crewmen stepped forward, his voice shaking with anger. "This isn't ours, Captain. This isn't hope. This is madness. That thing will burn everything. It doesn't care who, it just wants war." Rourke's eyes locked on the weapon. His face was hard, unreadable. Maybe. Or maybe it wants to finish what it started. Maybe it wants someone strong enough to hold it. Someone who won't break. The crew muttered again, louder this time. Some cursed under their breath. Some wanted to run. Fear was pulling them apart, tearing at their unity. And the weapon seemed to know it. Its glow pulsed faster, sharper, like it was feeding on their fear. Rourke stepped forward, his voice a growl. "Enough. You think fear will save you? You think running will save you? No. The galaxy already wants us dead. This thing is the only reason we're still breathing. So we either learn to live with it, or we die without it." The crew fell silent, his words cutting deep. But above them, the sky was already changing again. New signals crackled through the comms, different this time. Not alien. Human. A fleet was approaching, drawn by the same beacon that had lured the others. The crew rushed to their instruments, scanning the sky. Their eyes widened in shock. Dozens of human warships were inbound, their drives burning bright as they closed in. One of the engineers swallowed hard. "Captain, it's the Navy. Our Navy." For the first time, Rourke's face shifted. Not fear. Not relief. Something heavier. The human fleet was coming. They weren't allies. They weren't rescuers. They were here for the weapon. The crew turned to him, waiting for orders, their eyes filled with dread. Rourke looked up at the weapon, its glow casting his face in cold blue light. He knew what the Navy would do. They would take it, bury it, or destroy anyone who stood in their way. And Rourke. He wasn't ready to let go. The weapon hummed, louder now, as if it could already sense the new battle approaching. The sky filled with light as the human fleet descended. Dozens of ships spread out across the horizon, their engines burning like small suns. They came in tight formation, precise and disciplined. Their comm signals cut through the static, sharp and commanding. "This is Admiral Hale of the Terran Navy," the voice boomed across every channel. "Unidentified crew, power down and step away from the alien artifact immediately. You are ordered to surrender." The crew froze, their eyes wide. Relief flickered on some faces, but only for a moment. They knew better. The Navy was not here to save them. The Navy was here to take the weapon. Rourke stood still, his eyes fixed on the glowing cannon. His jaw tightened. He had served under men like Hale before. He knew what they would do. They would bury this weapon, lock it away, and leave humanity weak again in the face of stronger enemies. One of his men whispered, almost pleading, "Captain, maybe we should listen. It's our own people." Rourke turned slowly, his voice low and sharp. "Our people left us to die years ago. Our people abandoned us while we bled. Now they come to steal the only chance we've got? No. Not this time." The crew looked at him with mixed fear and loyalty. Some wanted to surrender, but his words cut deep. They had followed him this far. Could they turn back now? The weapon hummed louder, as if sensing the choice before them. Its glow spread across the ground, painting their faces in cold light. Admiral Hale's voice came again, harder this time. "This is your final warning. Step away or be treated as hostile. The weapon is under Navy command now." Rourke lifted his head, his eyes blazing. "No. Not theirs. Ours." The weapon seemed to answer. Its barrel rose slowly, pointing toward the sky, locking onto the nearest Navy ship. The crew gasped in horror. "Captain, it's aiming at them. At humans." But Rourke didn't flinch. His voice was iron. "They made themselves enemies the moment they tried to take it from us." The Navy fleet moved closer, their shields bright, their weapons hot. Warning shots lanced down, exploding in the junkyard around them. Metal and dust filled the air. The crew ducked, some screaming, others begging Rourke to stop. He ignored them. His hand touched the weapon again, the symbols burning under his skin. His vision blurred, and for a moment he saw flashes, the Navy fleet torn apart, fire raining down, humanity's chains broken forever. The weapon whispered in his mind, not with words, but with promises. "Power. Victory. Freedom. Fire," Rourke whispered. The cannon obeyed. A blinding beam tore through the sky, striking a Navy frigate dead center. The ship split in two, its wreckage burning as it fell into the atmosphere. The shockwave rocked the ground, shaking the crew to their knees. The comms exploded with human voices, shouts of alarm, orders to return fire, cries of disbelief. The Navy had not expected resistance. Certainly not from one of their own. "Captain, what have you done?" one of his crew screamed. "They're our people." Rourke's eyes blazed with fury. "No. They're chains. And I just broke one." The weapon fired again. Another Navy ship went dark, its engines exploding in silence before drifting into the void. Panic spread across the fleet. They turned their firepower on the junkyard, beams of energy raining down like a storm. The crew scattered, diving for cover as explosions ripped the ground apart. Their small ship was hit, torn open in flames. Their supplies, their escape, all gone. Now there was only the weapon. Some of the crew broke, running toward the Navy's comm frequency, shouting that they wanted to surrender. But the signal was drowned out by static, filled with the weapon's hum. It would not let their voices be heard. One of them turned on Rourke, eyes wild with terror. "You're killing us. You're letting it control you." Rourke grabbed him by the collar, dragging him close. His face was hard, his voice low. "It's not controlling me. I'm choosing. And I choose to never bow again." The man pulled away, shaking, but before he could say another word, the weapon roared once more. Another Navy destroyer erupted in fire. The sky was littered with debris, glowing like dying stars. But even as victory flashed before them, the weapon pulsed again, sending another cold wave through their minds. The crew staggered, clutching their heads as visions returned. Fleets burning, worlds shattering, humanity itself falling under the weapon's shadow. Rourke stood tall, his body trembling but his will unbroken. He saw the same visions, but he did not recoil. He embraced them. The Navy fleet pulled back, their formation breaking. But Admiral Hale's voice cut through the storm, filled with fury. "Rourke, you've lost your mind. You've doomed yourself and your crew. That weapon will consume you all." Rourke's voice thundered back across the comms, carried by rage and conviction. "No, Admiral. It will consume you. All of you. And from your ashes, humanity will rise stronger." The crew stared at him, their faces pale. They no longer knew if they were following a captain or a madman. And above them, the weapon hummed louder, as if pleased. The sky burned with wreckage. Pieces of human warships drifted like glowing ash, their flames fading into the dark. The scrapyard shook with every falling fragment, but the weapon stood tall, silent now, its barrel cooling, its glow dim but steady. The crew was broken. Some hid behind twisted hulls, too afraid to look at the sky. Others knelt on the ground, hands pressed to their heads, whispering prayers to gods they had forgotten. They had survived the aliens. They had survived the Navy. But now they faced something worse, the truth of what they had awakened. Rourke stood before the weapon, his back to his crew, his eyes fixed on its faint light. His clothes were torn, his skin burned, but his will was unshaken. The vision still burned in his mind. Fleets burning, worlds falling, humanity rising through fire. He felt the weight of it pressing on him, heavier than chains, sharper than blades. The weapon hummed softly, like a whisper only he could hear. It had shown him the past. It had shown him the future. And now it waited for his choice. Behind him, a voice broke the silence. "Captain, please. Stop this. Before it's too late." It was one of his oldest crew, a man who had followed him through battles, hunger, and exile. His face was pale, his eyes wet. "We can't fight everyone. Not the aliens. Not the Navy. Not the galaxy. This thing will destroy us. It will destroy everything." Others nodded, their fear spilling into desperate words. "We should leave it. Bury it again. Walk away while we still can." Rourke turned slowly, his face hard. "Walk away. And let them take it. The aliens. The Navy. Anyone else who comes? No. If we leave it, humanity dies the same as always, weak, begging for scraps. I won't let that happen." "But at what cost, Captain?" the man pleaded. "At the cost of our souls?" The weapon pulsed, its glow brightening, as if feeding on their argument. Rourke felt its call in his bones, a cold fire that made his blood race. He raised his hand and pressed it against the metal. The symbols flared, wrapping him in blue light. His crew cried out, shielding their eyes. And then the weapon spoke. Not in sound, not in words, but in their minds. 1,000 voices at once, deep and endless, filled their skulls. It showed them fire, destruction, and endless war. But it also showed them victory, human banners raised over stars, humanity unbroken, unstoppable. Some screamed, falling to the ground, unable to bear it. Others wept, trembling at the visions. Rourke stood tall, his teeth clenched, his body shaking but unyielding. He stared into the light, and the light stared back. You want me, he growled. Then you have me. But you'll fight for us. Not against us. The weapon pulsed once more, brighter than ever, as if answering. The ground shook. The junkyard lit up in blue fire. Old wrecks lifted into the air, floating, breaking apart, reshaping. Metal bent like clay, forming armor, forming wings, forming engines. Before their eyes, the scrapyard itself rose, piece by piece, into the sky. The crew gasped in horror and awe. The junk was no longer junk. It was becoming something vast, something alive. The weapon was no longer just a cannon. It was building itself a body, a ship like none they had ever seen. The earth cracked under the weight of its awakening. Towers of metal rose, glowing veins of energy running through them. The scrapyard became a cradle for a juggernaut. One crewman screamed, his voice breaking. It's not a weapon anymore, it's a monster. But Rourke's eyes burned with fire. No. It's ours. And with it, we'll tear down anyone who dares stand in our way. The Navy fleet tried one last desperate strike. The survivors regrouped, their guns blazing, their ships charging forward in fury. But the newly formed Juggernaut moved faster than anything human had ever built. Its cannons roared, its wings burned with light, and in a single sweep, it shattered the fleet. Ships cracked open like eggshells, their pieces scattered across the void. The human navy, once feared across the stars, was broken in a single night. The crew watched in stunned silence. Some laughed, hysterical. Some cried. Some simply stared, unable to believe they were alive. But deep in their hearts, they knew the truth. This was not their victory. It was the weapon's. Rourke stood at the center of it all, bathed in its glow, his face carved in shadow and light. He had bound himself to it, and it to him. He was captain no longer. He was something else, commander of a force that could unmake galaxies. The weapon hummed, soft and endless, like a promise. Or a warning. And in that moment, the galaxy trembled. Because from junk, a juggernaut had risen. And it had only just begun.